Episodes 1 and 2 were pretty good, but episode 3, now this is what I'm talking about. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are here to talk about the Vampire Lestat, episode 3, Toronto, or as we say here, Toronto, which I love that this episode is taking place in my home city. I'm very honored to be included. But also, I love that the show is doing that, considering that I believe Lestat is filmed in Toronto, or at least part of it is filmed in Toronto. So that's pretty cool to see in a show. Before we get into talking about this episode, because we got a lot to talk about, to be honest with you. Before we get into that, I would like to say to you, I would like to ask you a question. And that question is, what do you look for in a vampire story? What do you find you really connect with in that type of story? Let me know down in the comments below. For me, The Vampire Lestat really is it. It is one of my favorite books of all time. It is one of my favorite vampire stories of all time. And I love connecting with Lestat as a character, as a person, really getting into his mind and seeing the way that he sees the world and just how he relates to people. And all of the layers that really exist with this character. He does have a lot going on, and I feel that it has been challenging for us in adaptations to really capture that essence, that spirit of who Lestat really is. But here in season 3 with the Vampire Lestat, really Sam is the one steering our ship, and we are in such good hands. And I was a little nervous from the first 2 episodes, but this episode really made me see, I think, the vision and this sort of unraveling that we're getting of the character. You know, it starts off with this idea of who Lestat is from Interview with a Vampire. And I think what we're really doing with this show is we are, with each episode, peeling back the layers of the perceptions of who Lestat is, starting off with how Louis presented him, and then just getting to know more about him, and even more about the things that Lestat I don't think really likes about himself. There is a lot of self-loathing. There's a lot that Lestat deals with loneliness. I think I talked about this in my reviews for Interview with the Vampire season 1 and 2, which if you haven't heard my thoughts on that, there are videos on my channel. You can check them out. You can hear my thoughts on that. And that was something that I picked up that they were doing with Lestat and Sam's version of him in the first 2 seasons of the show. And I thought it was so brilliant because the truth is, that is who Lestat is. He might sometimes seem a little monstrous, but really deep down, it's because Lestat has this fear of being alone, this fear of nothingness. You know, it's very relatable. I feel like I also feel a lot of those things, that fear of loneliness, that fear of nothingness. And it's really cool how in this episode we kind of have a few different stories going on, a few different narratives at play, and we get to see how those all interact with each other and some of the parallels between them. So for Lestat, for example, we have him having this interview with Daniel Malloy and recounting some more of his past. So we already learned a little bit about Gabriella and what she means to him. Gabriella, she's known in the book. And then, of course, we have Nikki in this episode. This is really a very Nikki-focused episode. And Magnus, who is Lestat's creator, who is really only there for a brief time in the book, and who is really nasty. He really is, on a lot of levels, a very nasty person. Even though I bet that Magnus had his own stuff going on, and while I don't know as much about Magnus's journey, I'm not sure if we ever really get into that. I don't think anything from the point where I've read, we've done any deep dives into Magnus as a character. He may show up in the last 2 books, which are the only 2 that I haven't read in the Vampire Chronicles series. So I think what they did with Magnus was perfect. I think they captured the essence of who he is. There's also this whole fun sequence that I loved where Lestat is talking about that transformation, and he's giving his version of the story. He's giving the pop ballad rewrite of how he wants, I think, that transformation to have been, about how it was this liberation and it wasn't something, you know, to be feared. It wasn't this violent, terrible thing, which I also feel like has some parallels to when we're seeing, you know, the effects of the revolution with Lestat and Nicolas both in Paris, and them sitting down at this table and looking out the window and seeing, you know, this mob kind of going past, talking about, liberty and equality and fraternity. I think there's also this idea of all of those ideals and what they represent is beautiful on the page. But when you think about the cost of what goes into that, it's messy and it's bloody and it's violence. And just as we have that, I think that is also mirroring Lestat's views on his transformation. What it gave him is this beautiful new lease on life, and he's seen all of these things and done all of these amazing things in his vampire life and met so many lovely people that he's fallen in love with. He's had tragedy, he's had romance, he's done it all. But also, there is the cost of what it is to be a vampire, and it is messy and bloody and violent and terrible. And especially when we talk about Lestat's transformation, it really was a horror show. It is absolutely awful. Something that they show in this, but it is a little bit more on the peripherals of this version. And obviously in the music video, we're kind of making fun of it. Magnus looking for this person that he wanted to transform and maybe obsessing over Lestat, or maybe just Lestat happened to be his type. We don't really know. But this dungeon that he kept him in that just had all of these bodies, and they're all people that look similar to Lestat. They all have blonde hair and blue eyes. Very creepy. And that is where Lestat stayed for a period of time, just in and out of it. Magnus coming in and feeding on him. It really was just absolutely terrible. So I'm glad we went into that and we dealt with some of that trauma. And I love the way that it's showcased in this. And I love how at times Lestat also psychs us out. He takes us to that emotional place and then he's laughing and it's all kind of making fun of Louis and that tortured soul that Louis is. And Lestat is not that. He is not a tortured soul in the same way. He still has trauma. He has things in his past that he's not, I think, fully worked through, but the music for him is how he's dealing with that. And I love how in the end it all comes back to the music, and how Nikki also represents that freedom through the music in a way. When he came to Paris and him and Nicholas's, romance that they show in this, which is more vague in the book. It's not like an outright romance, but the implications are definitely there. So I feel like seeing Nikki as Lestat's lover makes a lot of sense based on what you get from the book. They're very close. They had been friends, I think, their whole lives, and they really do love and care about each other. The only thing is that I do wish we had seen more of the involvement of the Theatre de Vampire, and I don't know if we're going to get back to them and Lestat's earlier days with them and Armand's, but I would love to see some more of that because there is more to that story if we want to explore it. However, I do also acknowledge that this is a big book. The Vampire Lestat, much like Interview with the Vampire, it's a big book and we can't fit everything in there. And just like they had to make cuts from Interview with the Vampire, there's no Babettes, which I would have loved to see in that story, but there's none of that. And personally, I love what they're doing with it. I think this episode has really got me on board. I'm very intrigued, and I'm hopeful that we may even get some more Nikki down the line. Nikki is a very important character in Lestat's life, as much as he wants to pretend that it was really just a warning for him or that it was a phase. I think when Lestat says, when I told him that I loved him in that moment, it was true. You don't need to say in that moment, it was just true, Lestat. It's just the truth. I think Lestat carries a lot of guilt over what happened to Nikki, which is very reasonable to feel, considering that he is the one that transformed Nikki into what he was. But it was a really hard position for Lestat to be in. This person that you love, that you care about, and now you're in a totally different place in your life and you're trying to create this distance, but you're seeing how much it hurts that person for you to do that. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. There was a lot of strain that Nikki was under at that time. And so when Lestat makes that choice to turn him, it is not taken lightly. And I think he genuinely thinks it will be helpful to Nikki, and then it has that adverse effect, and he descends into this madness that maybe was always there a little bit. I like that implication that they have in this episode of, was Nikki maybe bipolar? Was that something that was already there? We're talking about the consequences of transforming someone who maybe already has some struggles that they're dealing with in their mind, and how does that affect the person when they become a vampire? How does that affect how vampirism takes a hold of them, and how it can kind of twist and warp a person even worse than where they were before? And those are the dangers. And transforming someone even like Claudia, who's so young. That's why we don't do things like that. So there are these rules. And Lestat was, breaking these rules. But as Louis is looking for that mentor when he's younger, we don't really go into it in this episode. Lestat really didn't have that because Magnus transforms him and then he's right into the fire. No real thoughts given to Lestat, no intense moments of wisdom. He gives him like a few pieces of advice and then he's out and that's it. And Lestat's on his own. And Lestat being on his own is something that he's no stranger to, but it is a place for him, I think, that is uncomfortable. And he does feel this loneliness that eats away at him. We see how that manifests in this episode. And I love the manipulation he does with Daniel, where he says, I'm going to give you the story, but it's personal. So I'm just giving it to you. I'm not giving it to you on a tape. You're going to think you're recording it, and I'm just going to be sitting there staring at you, using telepathy to communicate with you and give you all of this information. And for Lestat, it really is a share, but I love how for Daniel, he interprets it as like a slap in the face. It's not Lestat sharing. It's not Lestat opening up. It's Lestat taunting him. It's Lestat bullying him, and that is interesting to see how it's going to inform that dynamic. I love Lestat kind of moving into this place where he realizes he can let go of some of these things in his past, where he is in a place where he's acknowledging that what has happened to him has not been normal, has been awful, and he's choosing to move forward through it. He's using the music to get into it. Lestat says, I'm going to get worse and then I'm going to get better, and that's what the music is for. And so it's all about this idea of creative expression. It's also about that idea of ego. There's just so many levels that you can explore. And then in this episode, you add in the fact that we have Louis. We have Louis here, and Louis going around and he's working on his own mission. So you've got Lestat, you've got Daniel, you've got Louis. Louis is on a mission of revenge against Bruce, who we saw in the earlier seasons of the show. He is a tormentor of Claudia who does not appear in the books. Not a character that I know in the books. Or at least, if he is, I don't know, maybe he's in Atlantis and I just haven't met him yet. He's not there from what I recall, but I do like the addition of his character in terms of what it gives Claudia. I'm at a point in the book right now with Interview with the Vampire where I'm doing a book club over on my Patreon. We're about to wrap up the book this month, and I'm right at the tail end, and it's this moment where Louis kind of realizes that for Louis, he was a human, so he can connect with things on a different way than Claudia can. She only remembers being a vampire because she was transformed so young. It's all she's ever known. And so to her, there is a kind of emptiness to her, I think, that you see as you get to know her more, as Louis gets to know her more, and something that he can't quite connect with, and something that she also resents him for giving her. This idea of the dark gift is a bit of a curse to Claudia. I mean, it is a curse, and she's just trying to make do with what she has, but for her, the kill is everything. She doesn't have a lot. And the idea of when Louis reads her pages, her diary pages that he ripped out to Bruce, and he reveals that it is that torment that turned Claudia into someone who had no connection to anything. There was just nothing left for her. He snuffed out the light that was her when she was with Bruce. That was really cool because I think it adds another element as to why Claudia is the way Claudia is that makes sense with who her character is based on what I'm reading in the book. So seeing Louis go on this mission and the way that it was shot as well, the part where he approaches the house and we have this big establishing shot and you just see Louis, this figure, knocking, shooting, people are coming out, going up to the window, going in, and then watching him go through all the rooms and all the chaos that he creates, that he sows in the house. How he's just taking people out. Very matter of fact, like, do you know where killer is? Okay, you don't? Okay, you're dead. Just moving through the motions. I thought was so well done, and it really shows us where Louis is at this point in his life and just how much he has grown as a character, but how this part of him still exists. He will always be Claudia's father, brother, lover. There are all of these elements of what Claudia means to him. And I think that part of Louis is always there. It will never leave him. And so even while we've seen how much he's grown and changed, it's a reminder of there is a part of Louis that will always have that feeling for Claudia, have that connection to her. Basically, when you are in a coven with a vampire, when you make a vampire, when you have fledglings or you have a maker, the bond between you is so intense. And that is something that I think they're doing a great job of showing in this show, even with Lestat and Gabriella as well. It's really beautiful to see. And I'm very happy to see that Armand is back at the end of the episode as Arun, his current alias that he's wearing. And I'm curious to see how he will get pulled into all of this. I have some ideas based on Queen of the Damned and what I know of him there. And I would love to see us get more into the history between Lestat and Armand. And maybe that's where we'll be headed next episode, because it does seem that as we move through the present, we're also moving through the past, kind of a combination of Queen of the Damned and the Vampire Lestat rolled into one, but really where Queen of the Damned takes off that book, I think that's going to be near the end of this season, and then the next season will really be more focused on that. I am a little sad that we're not going to get more Lestat though, but I do think one season will be enough to give us everything we need to know about the character and allow us to really show just how many dimensions there are to him and get to know him for who he is, as opposed to knowing him through a different perspective. So all in all, this episode was amazing. I absolutely adored it. I loved the new song we got at the end. And I loved Magnus taunting Lestat about this album. I mean, I want the album. I think I'm going to wait until the album drops in the show. And then I imagine we will have a full track list for Lestat's album at that point, I'm hoping, so I can do a reaction to the album, and then I can put up a video where I discuss all the tracks and what I think they mean and how they connect to the character based on the analysis we see in the show, but also just based on the analysis that I have as someone that Lestat is one of my favorite characters of all time. That's really all I have for this one. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. Let me know your thoughts on this episode down in the comments, and until next time, friends, stay nerdy. Bye. And if you love hearing me talk about Anne Rice, the Vampire Chronicles, the Immortal Universe, you can check out more of that over here. Check it.